Hello viewers and learners of the Postgraduate Diploma in Environmental and Occupational Health. I introduce myself as Dr. Sushmita Vaskar, working in the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University. Today in this module of Environmental Toxicology, we will discuss on the sources of toxicants. So toxic agents, we have already discussed that they can be of chemical origin, of physical, or they can also be biological in nature, and they can produce various toxic effects in our body. There are different toxic agents which include, for example, in the chemicals, we discussed one case study that was of the potassium cyanide. In the same way, there are several radiations which come under the physical concerns, physical toxicity. And then we have the biological agents like viruses, bacterial agents, even the venom which is coming from the snake, the poisons. All this can also be toxicant, and they can exert their toxic effects in different ways. So therefore, there exists a number of toxicants and they can be classified by various means. Now, when we talk about the classification, now we can have the exposure classes and the user classes. There are, for example, the natural pollutants and the anthropogenic pollutants. So the toxic pollutants which are released through the natural processes, that comes under the classification of the natural pollutants. For example, we have the volcanic eruptions. So from this we have a lot of particulate matter and the gaseous emissions that are coming out. In the same way, the forest fires, these are all the pollutants of natural origin. Anthropogenic pollutants, these are coming from the human activities. This could be from the combustion activities, like from the industries, they could be from the mining processes, and all this, they can release the emissions, chemical emissions, particulate matter, gaseous, like for example nitrogen, the sulfur oxides and so on, and they can create respiratory problems and allergies among the human beings. Therefore, the learning objectives of this module will include understanding the various sources of the toxicants, and especially the classification of the toxicants, whether they are of the natural origin, whether they come from the human activities and so on, and we will see the several sources from where these toxicants can come from. Now, when we go into detail into the natural pollutant, so the toxic pollutants can be released through the natural processes. For example, the volcanoes and the volcanic emissions, they can emit sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, then hydrogen sulfide, and also the methane gas. In the same way, forest fires, they can also release smoke, unburned hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and also the ash. So all these particles and the particulate matters and the gaseous emissions, they can cause toxicity to a certain extent. So these natural pollutants, they can be harmful to human health when they are inhaled. In the same way, it is not only from the forest fire or the volcanic activities, but also even plant products, or the animal products, even they can also create certain hazards and toxic behavior to the human beings. So for example, the pollen grains. So this, you have seen the plants, they produce lot of the pollen grains and also spores, and some people, when they even go near it, they start sneezing and they have respiratory allergies. The same way, so such pollen, for example Parthenium allergy, that is coming from the Parthenium plant. So then they have some kind of a skin irritation, dermatitis and so on. So the plant and the plant products can also cause certain toxic effects. In the same way, dust storms, they can also come from the particulate matter, then the oceans, they can all release aerosols in the form of salt particles. These are all the particles of natural origin. Next is the anthropogenic pollutants. So these are the pollutants which are introduced due to human activity and mainly due to the man-made activities, which are coming from some industrial activities mainly. So these substances come from the three main sources. One is combustion, the second is through industrial activity, and the third is coming from the mining and the drilling processes. You have seen that the natural resources, for example open cast mining, there so much of the mining activities are being carried out and the entire air gets polluted. So that is why the environmental impact assessment reports are always important before carrying out such activities, and whether the people living in such areas will be affected by these pollutants, by these particulate matter and so on. Now when we talk about pollutants, they could be of several types. They could be the air pollutants, then we can have the indoor pollutants, the water pollutants, soil pollutants. We have the heavy metals which contaminate our soil and the water environment. Then the nitrates and the phosphates which are coming from the agricultural sources, petroleum and the oil pollutants, volatile organic carbons, then the polychlorinated biphenyl, which are also organic compounds. There are solvents, then asbestos, therapeutic drugs which are being administered to patients and people, drugs of abuse, biological toxicants, and also cosmetics, last but not the least. So all these are the various types of the toxicants and pollutants which can exert toxic effects in the human beings. First, coming on to the air pollutants. So humans have been polluting the air, and there are also significant natural pollutants such as the terpenes from the plants, smoke from the forest fires, fumes, and also smoke from the volcanoes. In the same way, we have the gaseous pollutants, and all this can include ozone, the oxidants, then the sulfur and the nitrogen oxides, and so on, even the carbon dioxide and the carbon monoxide. There are also fine particulate matter in the air. Now let me tell you, when we talk about particulate matter, there are two classifications that we give, the particulate matter 10 and 2.5. So some, like for example 2.5, can be so minute, they are nanoparticles, that they can enter and get lodged into your lungs for long periods of time. So thereby they can cause the respiratory symptoms and the lung disorders and certain other allergies. Indoor pollutants. So indoor itself, it refers to those pollutants which are actually released from indoor activities, that is inside. So these could be carried out from the heating activities, from cooking, and in this, for example, people use charcoal, then of course we use the gas. There can also be solar heating sources. Especially indoor, they can also use the wood, and all these unburnt residues and particulate matter can then kind of contaminate the homes. In the same way, tobacco smoking and also the use of incense sticks. So there was a report which was carried out in China and Japan, and here the scientists said that those who used incense sticks for religious purposes or for cultural reasons, their homes contained a higher amount of the particulate matter and the pollutants when compared to those people who did the tobacco smoking. So here you can see how toxic even the incense sticks can be to human health. In the same way, radon, which can come from the construction material itself. Then a certain type of granite can also release certain radioactive matter. The same way, some gases, microorganisms from people and from animals. Now in the winter months, you will see that sometimes when the homes are heated and there is no air entry, it is very humid, then the fungal matter and the fungus starts growing either in the washrooms or even in other rooms where even the wet clothes are being dried. So that can also create certain kinds of fungal toxins and the plant toxicity from the plants and from the fungus, mycotoxins, that can also create toxicity to the human health. Then the construction material, the buildings, they can give out gaseous indoor chemicals that can also have serious health concerns. Then, now this is a figure which is showing that a person is cooking something in a big pot, and here they are using the plant-based material and also wood and charcoal. So here carbon monoxide, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, they all can be released from the wood, from crop residues, from animal dung also, which is used for the cooking. And they can cause the respiratory infections in poorly ventilated areas. Now sometimes you would have seen the people who are asthmatic or those people who even have bronchitis, they when they use even kerosene for this pumping gas stoves which are used at home for heating water and so on, or even cooking, you will see that they have some kind of the asthmatic and the wheezing problem, because they are allergic to such kind of the material which is being used, that is the energy source which is being used for that pumping gas or pumping gas stove. Therefore, and then they will have to take some deriphyllin or deriphyllin injections or tablets. Doctors prescribe various other medications. So it is the type of fuel that is used in the indoor cooking purpose also plays a very important role, and this has a direct relation to the human health. Now, water pollutants. So the surface waters and the groundwater both can be polluted from the point and the non-point sources. Industrial effluents, they are being discharged into the waters, and this is a classic example of a point source pollution. Fertilizers and pesticide application, they are used in the agricultural fields and they enter the surface waters through rainfall. So that is, for example, at one place when the pesticide or the fertilizers are being applied, it is not necessary that only that place has to be contaminated, but that is taken to a long distance, and then the adjoining agricultural field, or it could even penetrate, and the groundwater can be contaminated, and then when people use that as a source for the drinking water, then that can also be heavily contaminated with these agricultural pesticides. So these are examples of the non-point source of water pollution. Industrial waste. Now they are discharged into the waters and they contain organic and inorganic waste, and they also include some kind of hazardous chemicals. So when we talk about industries, there are several industries. You can have the biomedical, the pharma industries, you can have the industries that are the textile based, the cottage based industries, you can have the tannery industries. So every industry uses a different kind of a chemical in their processes. And that is why it is very important that the industries treat their discharge waters before releasing it into the mainstream, that is into any water body or into the environment. And now that is actually compulsory, and serious action is being taken if people do not treat their water and discharge it. So why? Because toxic effects are seen in the humans when they consume this contaminated water. And we will see that even the aquatic flora and the fauna also get affected in the process when these contaminated waters are being consumed. Now, soil pollutants. When wastes are not properly disposed of, then even the soil also can get polluted. You would have seen in several parts of the city, wherever you stay, there will be dumps of the waste which are being actually improperly disposed. So these waste dumps, they may have different kind of material in them. They can have the cloth material, they can have polythene, then they can have the plastic residues, then they can have the outdated medicines which are being disposed, they can have the electronic waste and so on. So when all this is not properly disposed of, then the soil gets polluted, and the soil will get all these heavy metals will then be accumulated in the soil. So the soil contaminants, they can include the domestic waste, which is normally the biodegradable waste. Then you can have the solid waste, you can have electronic waste, municipal waste, agricultural waste, and all this contain a number of the chemicals which are really harmful to life. Further, the agricultural toxicants like the persistent pesticides, this cannot biodegrade, and they remain in the soil for several years together. So this will then move in the food chain, and then that can cause a greater health impact. For example, you might have understood the toxic hazardous pesticides, their effects of the organochlorine compounds like DDT, of endosulfan, the same way aldrin, dieldrin and chlordine. So these are actually biomagnified in the food chain, and the human beings when they consume these the plant products and the food products containing them, for example cashew nuts, or it could be any kind of the vegetables, then we can actually get the higher amount of the DDT and these toxic compounds, which will then be accumulated in our body tissue. Heavy metals. So the industrial activities, they release a lot of the heavy metals. As I told you, we have a lot of industries like the tanning industries, textile industry, and India alone, if you see, we have several textile industries. Now we know that the Bombay is a Manchester of India, Coimbatore is the Manchester of South India. So these places, they have large amount of the cottage textile industries, and they have lot of dyeing activities. So these dyes, they will release a number of the chemicals. They will use the several kind of the chemicals in their dyeing process. So this can again release toxicity. So the waters that are being discharged, that you will see that they are highly colored in nature. Any small place, in your place, even if you go and see, if you give a plain white dupatta and you want to dye that into pink or green or any other color, you will see the different kind of the colors that they will be having. So these are not just simply colors. Sometimes you can have vegetable colors, like nowadays you get even handbags and bags which are tanned using the natural plant products. These are not toxic to the skin or to the human health. So such products can be used. But these boxes or the tins which contain these colored material which are totally chemical and toxic in nature, that will really cause toxicity both to the environment and also to the human health. Lead and arsenic. These are highly toxic and they are found even in the potable water in certain areas. Lead can enter from the lead pipes, then the lead solder, lead toys, then leaded gasoline, utensils, and also paints can contain lead. Lead is also used in certain cosmetics like lipsticks, and regular use that can enter the system and again cause health effects. So sometimes you have seen that people will develop depigmentation of their lips. It becomes either white in color or it becomes discolored. That is all due to the chemicals that are contained in these lip gloss or the lipsticks. So therefore we should avoid, and we can use the natural products, for example that which contain the beetroot butters, then that which is natural from the milk or from the dairy product. All this can be applied to give our lips and our skin that natural glow and effect. Lead again induces neurological damage, because sometimes we think that it is externally applied to the skin. What is the damage that is going to be happening inside? How can it go to up to the brain level? But when you are using a product, skin is the largest organ in the human body, one of the largest organs. So the skin can easily absorb all these chemicals, and there are different routes of exposure and the routes through which these chemicals can enter our body. So in the same way, lead, it can enter either through absorption, through inhalation, through ingestion, and so on, and thereby it can penetrate the blood-brain barrier and cause the neurological damage. And it can also penetrate the placental barrier and bring about birth defects among the children and the gestation period. Arsenic toxicity. Now in West Bengal, in Bangladesh, if you have seen, there people have developed a certain kind of skin hyperpigmentation and the keratosed skin, which is actually a hardened surface. The skin surface becomes really hardened. And arsenic toxicity, it is not manifested in a day or in a week, but it takes several years to be manifested. Normally it takes 10 to 15 years for the disease to be manifested. So arsenic specially, it can leach into the water from the pesticide sprays, from arsenic containing fossil fuels, from the leaching of the mine tailings, and also from smelter runoff. So there is acute and chronic level exposures. Chronic high level exposures to this arsenic toxicity, that can cause the abnormal skin pigmentation, hyperkeratosis, abdominal pain, and also cancers. So if you see the skin of these people who are affected with the arsenic toxicity, they will have leprosy like lesions also. So the first stage is the keratosis, then it becomes melanosis, and then that will become the leprosy like lesions. Cadmium is another heavy metal, and this enters the food chain through industrial activities. It can accumulate in the tissues of aquatic organisms. Now in Japan, the rice products and the rice was contaminated with cadmium, and that caused the disease itai itai, meaning ouch ouch, and that was characterized by severe kidney damage, painful bone and the joint problems. So the person became completely hunched, and they had a forward tilt, the body was forward tilted. Mercury. This again comes from the industries who are manufacturing the thermometers, then those that are manufacturing plastics, vinyl chloride, and all this is highly toxic to the living beings. The Minamata disease in Japan, this occurred due to the consumption of the mercury contaminated fishes, and it resulted in neurological disorders, paralysis, and also mental disorientation. Nitrates and phosphate. These arise from the contamination due to fertilizers and discharge from the sewage treatment plants. Also leachate from the septic tanks, the manure and detergents, all this can be hazardous in nature. So they leach into the soil and the drinking water. Nitrates in drinking water, that can cause health effects even among the newborn children, and that disease is referred to as the methemoglobinemia. Those children are referred to, it is also referred to as the blue baby syndrome, and those children will actually appear blue in color because of the problem of the oxygen carrying capacity will be impaired and reduced. So this occurs due to the formation of nitrosamine and methemoglobinemia. So the nitrites are first converted to nitrites by the bacteria in the intestine. Thereafter, this nitrite ions that will combine with the hemoglobin and they form methemoglobin. This methemoglobin that reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, and that leads to the blue baby syndrome. Because you know how supple and pinkish we are, that is all because of the oxygen and the blood and the circulatory mechanism that is going on in the body. When there is any block or when the oxygen carrying capacity in the blood is totally reduced, then this blue baby syndrome occurs. This is seen in the young children and in the newborn children who have ingested the nitrate containing water and also milk food. It is also reported that the mothers who have all these chemicals for even DDT and this nitrate containing compound, even their breast milk was supposed to contain these nitrates, and that also have caused certain kind of syndromes in the newborn children. Petroleum and oil products. This especially you would have seen the reports in the newspapers and also among the animal conservationists and the people, animal ethics committee. They have seen that the shore animals, it's not only the bigger higher mammals like the dolphins or the mammals, but even the smaller insects and the mussels, that is those belonging to the phylum mollusca. The crabs, the shrimp, the mussels, the barnacles, all this are affected by the toxic hydrocarbons and the oil and the petroleum compounds that are ingested by them. So how do these petroleum and oil products reach the shore animals? Because when the petroleum or these oil products are transported by the big ocean in the ships or these carriers, then there can be spillage. Even when these decks, the ship decks, are being cleaned using cleaning agents, there again these oil pollutants can then be it can run off into the ocean waters. So that way, and this actually oil, if you see, it floats on the water. So easily these animals, their gills and all that could be totally blocked by these oil and petroleum products. So they could be choked to death. In the same way, volatile organic compounds, we refer to them as VOCs. They include the halogenated solvents and petroleum products. They are used in the industries involving degreasing, dry cleaning, paint, and also in the military. The most important VOCs, they include the trichloroethylene, toluene, benzene, chloroform, tetrachloroethylene, 1,1,1-trichloroethane, ethyl benzene, trans-1,2-dichloroethane, xylene, dichloromethane, and vinyl chloride. These can quickly move in the groundwaters, and high exposure levels to these compounds that can result in headaches, impaired cognition, kidney toxicity, cancer, and also reproductive disorders. Now the PCBs, they include the polychlorinated biphenyls and the phenols, the cyanides, plasticizers, solvents, and numerous industrial chemicals. They are used as coolants in the electrical transformers. They are stable, lipophilic, that is fat loving. They are broken down slowly only in the tissues. Due to these properties, they accumulate to high concentrations in the fishes and also in the birds like the waterfall. Solvents. Many types solvents are used in the industrial processes, and they have systemic toxic effects on the nervous system and also in the blood. Benzene, for example, this is used in the rubber industry, in the caning industry, in the printing, and in the shoe manufacturing industries. Benzene will affect the blood and the hematopoietic system, and it also affects the bone marrow, because the bone marrow is very important in the blood and the blood forming tissues and the platelet formations, and this benzene is an immunosuppressant. Benzene exposure, it results in the decrease of the white blood cells, the red blood cells, and also in the platelets. So continued exposure, that will cause severe bone marrow damage, aplastic anemia, and also leukemia. Other toxic solvents, they include the aliphatic hydrocarbons, halogenated aliphatic hydrocarbons, the aliphatic alcohols, glycols, glycol ethers, and also aromatic hydrocarbons. Asbestos. This material is used in insulation, in roofing for the houses, asbestos cements, brake linings, electrical appliances, and also coating of the materials. The inhalation of asbestos, this causes asbestosis. It is a respiratory disease characterized by the scarring of the lungs, fibrosis, and calcification, and it also leads to the lung cancer. Therapeutic drugs. So generally all the therapeutic drugs are toxic and they produce hazardous effects at some dose. This depends on several factors like the dose, the nature of the drug, individual and genetic variation, because for one person if one drug suits, for the other person he may be allergic to it. For example, sulfur drugs or penicillin, some may be allergic, but for another person it may suit the same. Diet and age is also a factor. That is why the dosage of the drug is important when the doctors administer the same. The side effect of chloroquinol, an anti-diarrhea drug which was used in Japan in 1960, this caused stiffness of the joints accompanied by damage also to the optic nerve. Birth defects and teratogenesis, this can cause by drugs like the thalidomide, which was given for the morning sickness among the women. Dermatitis, this is a common side effect of the externally and topically applied corticosteroids. The same way, there are also toxic effects on the blood which are caused by the chlorpromazine. Hemolytic anemia, this is caused by methyl dopa and megablastic anemia, which is induced by the methotrexate. Eye toxicity and glaucoma, this can be caused by certain corticosteroids. There are also many other drugs which cause toxicity to other organs. Drugs of abuse, these include the depressants of the central nervous system, because sometimes they can be used as the stimulants. They give some kind of an exhalated feeling for the person who is using it, and this depressants of the CNS include the ethanol, methaqualone, then the secobarbital. Stimulants of the central nervous system, that includes cocaine, methamphetamine, then caffeine, nicotine, opioid drugs, then lysergic acid diethylamide, then the phencyclicidin, then the tetrahydrocannabinol, then the most active ingredient of the marijuana, that is this compound. So these are all the drugs of abuse, and they can have certain toxic effects which are exerted on the central nervous system itself. Finally, we have biological toxicants. These are natural occurring substances which can cause toxicity, and they include from the plant, from the animal, from the algal, the fungal, and also the microbial toxins. So they can be classified as the phytotoxins and the mycotoxins. It is pertinent to understand that a toxin is a toxicant which is produced by a living organism, and it is not used as a synonym for toxicant. So that terminology is important. These toxins, they are metabolic products used for defense against the pathogens. These natural products are used in beneficial pharmaceutical purposes and also in biological warfare. Aflatoxins, they are products of the Aspergillus flavus. It is a fungus that contaminates grain, maize, and the peanuts. Aflatoxin B1, this is most toxic and it has carcinogenic effects. Cosmetics. So cosmetics, we are all fond of this, applying either for the face or for the hair, for the nails and so on. But all this can contain chemical compounds. They can induce allergies and you can contract dermatitis. Lipsticks, for example, they contain lead at varying concentrations. Hair dyes, they can contain resorcinol or ethanolamine, and that can be toxic. Thioglycolates and thioglycerol, they are also used in the cold wave lotion and depilatories, which all have the. In the same way, there are other cosmetics that are used like sodium hydroxide, formaldehyde, which is used in hair straighteners, then paraffin wax, which is used in some lotions and compounds that is known to hinder the skin breathing. So recently you would have seen some of the baby products, which came, they were advertised, and that it came into the limelight saying that it is interfering with the baby's skin breathing because it has paraffin wax in it. So we should avoid such compounds. Same way, parabens and SLS, that is, and all this has been shown to cause toxicity among the laboratory animals. So all these are toxic and they will also affect the human health. These were some of the sources of the toxicants that can have harmful effects on human health. So finally, summarizing this module, so we understood the various sources of the toxicants which have the various origins. We also understood how these toxicants which are used in daily life, they can exert their toxic effects in different ways, and even drugs, compounds, cosmetics, and those that are coming from the industrial activities, the air pollutants, the soil and the water that we drink, even that is not free of pollutants, and we need to make careful choices, and we should understand the environmental impacts that have on the human health. Thank you for your patient listening.